Now, I'd hope every right-minded person is still pleased that 4 more Israeli hostages were rescued. But of course, the usual anti-Israel crowd has slammed the way the operation was carried out, which of course tragically led to Palestinian casualties. It's war. Of course, casualties are a tragedy. Any loss of innocent life is. And we should all be angry about it, and loudly. But not at the country trying to rescue its people, but at the terrorists who took them and embedded them in civilian homes. Former US intelligence officer Michael Pregent knows how this stuff works back to front, including in Iraq. And he joins me now. Michael, thank you so very much for your time. I'd love your perspective, first of all, on the rescue mission itself. How did you determine it went?
I mean, there's nobody better at this than the Israeli Defense Forces. Everything that our Delta Force has learned has been in this area when it comes to Israel dealing with terrorist groups like Hezbollah, dealing with groups like the Sword of Islam back in the day. And now they're dealing with groups like Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad. And everything we learn about counterterrorism and counterinsurgency, we learn from the IDF. And everything that the enemy learns, they learn from Hezbollah. So Israel has been at the point of all of this, and our relationship with Israel is the reason that I'm a big supporter of it, because when we do things the right way, it's because we're mirroring what Israel does when it comes to counterinsurgency and counterterrorism.
What do you make of the criticism surrounding the mission, and it's continual and it's loud, and keeping in mind, of course, that civilians did lose their lives? Hamas is who I would hold responsible for that. You?
It's the only country that will be criticized for rescuing its own people from a terrorist organization. And when the IDF went in, they went in like the show Fauda, right? They went in dressed like the locals. They speak Arabic. They were undetected. They went in and they conducted 2 simultaneous raids. The raid with the 3 male hostages came under fire from these military-age males and from Hamas. And then Hamas puts the call out, everyone, the IDF is here. And it's not like everybody goes inside and hides. These military-age men come out with weapons and start shooting. And in all of this chaos, we cannot discount that Hamas killed a bunch of Palestinians. And these Palestinian military-age males killed a bunch of Palestinians. And yes, the IDF did as well. But those Palestinians are, again, those men with weapons. It's the same men that were beating the bodies in the back of pickup trucks as they brought in dead Israelis from that music festival into Gaza.
Is there any way you believe that Israel could have done this differently, or done this as successfully with less civilian casualties?
They did it the best way they could, and some of the criticism has been, why didn't you warn the civilians who were coming in? You know, I don't understand this. Why didn't you warn Hamas that you're getting ready to come in so Hamas could execute the prisoners, right? Execute the hostages. Israel's combatant to civilian ratio is like no other country's. Our ratio in Iraq during the ISIS campaign was 1 ISIS fighter to 10 civilians. And in one case, during the last operation in Mosul to clear out ISIS, 1 ISIS fighter to 60 civilians. And we're criticizing Israel for taking out 1.4 civilians to 1 fighter.
Just before we started, Michael, you mentioned you just finished another interview where you were asked your thoughts on the US Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, saying that Hamas wasn't acting in good faith. I almost have no words, and I use words for a living, but how could anyone expect a terrorist organisation to act in good faith?
The Biden administration acts like this didn't happen to us. We lost 47 Americans on that day. They happen to be dual citizens, but the Biden administration continues to act like Hamas didn't kill Americans, like Hamas did not take Americans hostage. And we have Secretary Blinken. The only people that are afraid of Secretary Blinken are inside of the State Department, because he's warned them if they use the wrong pronouns, they would be fired. There's no other enemy, adversary, or terrorist group that's afraid of Antony Blinken. He's milquetoast. So it's embarrassing. As a veteran of 3 wars, as a former intel officer specializing in terrorist groups, that a civilian Secretary of State would put more hope in Hamas than he does in rescuing our U.S. hostages.
It's appalling, and I'd add to that Joe Biden in terms of no one being scared of him, but I would say that people in his own department wouldn't be either. He's so unwell on so many levels, as I spoke about earlier in the show. It does blow my mind that we're living in this time when people find moral clarity so difficult. So difficult. It terrifies me, to be honest. We can all mourn the loss of every single innocent life. We can look at beautiful little innocent babies hurt and feel physically sick inside. But most people, I hope, understand where to apportion that blame. But sometimes I wonder.
When you're taught that life is cheap and that your mission is just to kill, how many civilians are there really in this fight? And we've seen recent polling where 70% of the Palestinians say that they support October 7th, and they would still vote for Hamas to be in power. And anytime you act like that with a terrorist group, this is what happens. It's embarrassing as a veteran. It's embarrassing as someone who's trying to look at this to see that our leaders have lost to the Taliban, have lost to Qatar, have lost to Tehran, have lost to Putin, have lost to China, and they can't even handle a group like Hamas. How are they going to handle Hezbollah? How are they going to handle Al-Qaeda or ISIS? It's embarrassing.
Yeah, that's so very powerful. Michael, thank you so very much for your time. Really appreciate your perspective.
Thank you for having me, Aaron.